Suzanne, it's such a pleasure to welcome you to the Australian Ballet. I know you've had a number of weeks with us, not only in the rehearsal studio, but also on a screen. You
Yes.
conducted so many rehearsals remotely because of the age we're living in, but a testament to how well you know this work, Anna Karenina. It's really, really amazing how you have translated the movement to the dancers here at the Australian Ballet. So welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be in person.
I know, not through a screen.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to talk about the creative process. And that's something that we here at the Australian Ballet weren't afforded the gorgeous opportunity to have Anna Karenina be created from the ground up. Although it is as much our production as it is the Joffrey ballets in Chicago.
Definitely.
But tell me what it was like on day one when things were unraveling and you realized that a story like this, Anna Karenina, which is so famous, is being sort of created in front of you.
I mean, it's hard to even pinpoint what day one was because the process leading up to day one in the studio was just so long and so thought out, and we had meeting after meeting. So day one in the studio was actually really kind of a quiet moment. I had worked with Yuri on quite a bit of his choreography, but most of it had already been created. This is, I think, the second new work that I had assisted him in.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wanted to start with one Anna and one Vronsky working on pas de deux. Nobody else in the room. He said, "You'll teach it later," to everybody else.
That's so interesting.
Just wanted a really kind of quiet process, quiet, safe space where people can just kind of explore and try new things out. And so it was a really nice way to begin, actually, to work on a pas de deux when you know it's going to be a big full-length production and lots of group dances, but he just kind of needed to start there and go from there.
That's so interesting because usually in a studio you have the different casts, the understudies. It can be sometimes just for a duet, a room of 15 people.
Right.
Or when you're in a full call with the entire company, it's 70 people.
Right.
And then you add all the, the musicians, and it just multiplies. But to start something out with just two characters and the choreographer and you, that's really intimate. And I think, some of the best creation has happened with that intimacy, the doors shut.
Absolutely.
The birth or spark of ideas.
Yeah, and it was such a process for us that we eventually, when we had to pass it on to other casts and kind of make it more uniform, because a lot of it, Yuri's work is he's a very musical man, and to work with this gorgeous score makes it even more interesting, but not so much counts. And I had a harder time doing what I do in passing that information on, because I was really up in the room with them while it was being created, not sitting at a table writing notes. And so we as a team of those first few people in the room had to kind of work together to pass that information on later.
Yeah. And what's amazing, though, is, you as a former dancer, myself as a former dancer, we realize how important the creative process is. We can dance some of the greatest ballets that were created, but to have something created from the ground up, as you as the dancer, as you as the ballet mistress, it's so special.
I really loved this process. It is so special, and it's something that no one else can have. No one else can have that moment of something being created on you, or like you said, just even being in the room. And I was so thrilled to be a part of so much of this process, not just in the studio, but I was in every production meeting. I knew every prop that was coming onto the stage,
every
and
inch of it.
helped pick stuff out. It really was an enormous, time-consuming, but enormous process that I got to be a part of from beginning to end, and I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah, great. So I want to fast forward then. So you've had, this rehearsal process, this rehearsal period, sometimes quite intimate, as you said, but then sometimes with the entire company, and you saw the birth of this creation. Then we go to an opening night. And I know that there's nothing like any opening nights. They're very, very special. But an opening night of a world premiere of a full-length ballet, a 2-hour work, is a special, special evening. Tell me what was going on kind of backstage with you, with Yuri, with the company. We're going to experience that as well when we premiere Karenina.
You will. Your company will be a lot more prepared than we were. Not that we were unprepared, but
in what way?
It's never enough time on stage,
Yeah.
especially for a world premiere. Things were changing constantly. No, this hat shouldn't be here. Put it over there. Just little details were changing all the time. Platforms moving in space, and it ended up that I actually didn't watch the world premiere from the front because I was backstage counting for dancers.
You weren't even afforded the opportunity to sit down.
I missed the world premiere, so I'm going to catch the world premiere on.
That's amazing. Well, I hope we give you that opportunity, that you're not counting for the Australian ballet dancers.
Yeah.
But that goes to show, I think, when you are so involved in the process and committed that you forego your ticket.
One of the dancers said to me, maybe a few days before the premiere, you realize you're not going to get to watch it, right? We really need you backstage. And there wasn't a moment of feeling sorry for myself.
No.
Of course, I wanted to be in there. I'd been such a part of their process too, and really such a collaboration that it was okay to be back there and kind of experiencing it with them on their side of the orchestra.
Yeah, now that I sort of think about it, I think that you were probably in the best position.
Maybe.
Because you might have been a nervous wreck sitting in your seat next to Yuri Posahov.
Yeah.
Clawing your leg.
I don't even know where Yuri was, to be honest.
No,
I'm sure
you don't.
he was pacing in the...
Yeah. Well, it's a little like George Balanchine, he's so famous for standing in the front wing, that you had your Balanchine moment.
I did. That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. So let's then go on to Yuri, because I know, he has had so many successes around the world. He's a celebrated creator. What was it like, now that he's a seasoned choreographer.
Right.
So what was it like being in the room and going along this process with someone that, developed this idea but had experience? He wasn't a novice. He's not a novice. What was that like to sort of see him unfold, again, such a famous story?
Honestly, it was one of the easiest processes for him. Material came flowing out of him. And like I said, I had worked on one other new creation with him, and he's an absolute genius, but his mind works in sort of little fragments. So we would do a little section from here and then another section from here, and in his mind, that completely connected. But the dancers and I
had no idea.
Yeah, I had to really listen to the whole score and put it together and say, oh, now I get it. This connects to that.
Yeah.
But this was a much easier, I'm not saying it was easy, but I think he'd been thinking about it for so long, and then to have that score just tell you exactly what you're supposed to be saying at every moment.
Yes.
It just flowed. It was so, it was a wonderful process. I always love watching him because the things he sees and creates are just amazing to me. But to see him so comfortable in that moment was really such a beautiful thing, knowing him, and to see him feel that way was great.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you watch Karenina, you see not only how choreographically rich it is, I mean, it's very, very dense.
I joke with him that he never repeats a step, ever.
Come to think of it, I don't think he does.
He doesn't. I've said it. I'm like, you can do this again.
Yeah. No, he likes it. He
thinks that's sort of a cop-out,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So I think, choreographically it's so rich, but as well dramaturgically, because Karenina, Tolstoy, I mean, those are dense, dense stories.
800 pages.
Yeah. And you have to boil it down because this is a nonverbal art form.
Right.
So I think a huge challenge was to boil it down in terms of how you tell the story, how you unfold the story,
Right.
in a nonverbal way.
And it kept boiling down. We started with, you can't use every single character in that book in 2 hours. The audience will get confused because it's a nonverbal art form. So we have to show faces, we have to show costumes, that's how we can identify who is who, and dialogue really in the body instead of dialogue.
Yeah.
But even when we started, we had more characters in there than we had time for. So there were still some characters that got taken out just to make it the most efficient story.
Yeah.
There are 2 stories that we really needed to show. And anybody extra just would confuse people.
Yeah. Well, it really makes sense. I mean, it's so touching as well for the characters, for those 4 characters. It's a tragedy, but it's also full of hope. And it really, then you add the music, and musically it's very touching too. It's such a beautiful, beautiful production. And just the sets, and I love that narrative work, story ballets can still look so modern and fresh. And I think that's what, Tom, the set designer, and Yuri and Ilya, the composer, have done with Karenina. It was such a famous story.
Yeah, they really each told their part of the story so beautifully, and then all of that coming together really makes a new special full length.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to have it here in Australia. I know the dancers are hungry for this work to portray the story.
They have been fabulous.
Yeah, they have. They are great. I adore them like a dad. But thank you again for coming to Australia, bearing quarantine, and for putting this beautiful work on the company.
We're so happy to do it, and it has been a collaboration with this company
Absolutely.
From the beginning, and that has always been in our minds. So we wouldn't want it any other way.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.